Housewife's confession: why no one talks about the hard side of motherhood. In the picture-perfect suburb of Maplewood Heights, Connecticut, 32-year-old Rebecca Chen Martinez appears to have it all. A successful lawyer husband, 2 beautiful children, and a pristine home that could grace magazine covers. But beneath the carefully curated social media posts and PTA meeting smiles lies a woman drowning in the silent struggles of modern motherhood. When her carefully constructed facade begins to crumble during a particularly challenging week, Rebecca must confront the harsh realities that society refuses to acknowledge about the sacrifices and isolation that come with being a mother. Through unexpected connections with other mothers facing their own hidden battles, she discovers that the path to authentic happiness sometimes means admitting that perfection is not only impossible, it's destroying her from the inside out. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if my story touched your heart today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next confession. Give this video a like if it resonated with you, and share it with another woman who needs to know she's not alone. Together, our voices are stronger. Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm. The October morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the Chen Martinez household, casting a warm glow over what appeared to be domestic perfection. Rebecca Chen Martinez stood at her kitchen island, methodically packing organic lunches into color-coordinated containers, while her 7-year-old daughter Emma practiced violin in the living room, each screech of the bow making Rebecca's left eye twitch almost imperceptibly. "Mom, I can't find my soccer cleats!" 9-year-old Marcus thundered down the stairs, his school uniform already wrinkled despite Rebecca having laid it out perfectly the night before. "Check the mudroom," Rebecca called back, not looking up from spreading almond butter on whole grain bread with the precision of a surgeon. She'd read somewhere that maintaining eye contact during mundane tasks led to emotional overwhelm. She couldn't afford overwhelm. Not today. The coffee maker gurgled to life. Her third pot since 5 a.m. She'd been awake since 3:47, mind racing with the day's logistics, Marcus's soccer practice at 4, Emma's piano lesson at 5:30, grocery shopping squeezed somewhere in between, dinner prep, homework supervision, bedtime routines that somehow stretched until 9 p.m. despite starting at 7. "Rebecca, have you seen my briefcase?" David emerged from upstairs, adjusting his tie with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. At 34, her husband still possessed the effortless confidence that had attracted her in law school. But lately, that confidence felt like another item on her endless to-do list, something else to maintain and manage. "Dining room table, next to your case files," she replied automatically. She'd moved it there at midnight after he'd left it on the kitchen counter, where it would have been in the way of her morning routine. David grabbed his briefcase and planted a distracted kiss on her cheek. "Don't wait up tonight. The Henderson deposition is running late, and I'll probably grab dinner with the team." Rebecca's hand paused over the lunch containers. "That's the 4th night this week." "It's a big case, Becca. You know how it is." He was already halfway to the garage, fingers flying across his phone screen. She knew exactly how it was. She'd lived it for 9 years now, watching her husband's career soar while hers had been carefully folded and stored away like seasonal clothes. Still there, but never quite the right time to bring them out. "Mom, I still can't find my cleats." Marcus reappeared, backpack sliding off one shoulder, hair sticking up in 3 directions. "Did you look in the bin marked soccer equipment?" Rebecca's voice carried the particular brand of patience that mothers develop, part genuine care, part barely contained frustration. "Oh." Marcus disappeared again. Emma's violin suddenly went silent, replaced by the sound of sobbing. Rebecca found her daughter crumpled on the living room carpet, violin bow clutched in her small fists. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I hate this song. I hate violin. Why do I have to play stupid violin when Sarah gets to do dance?" Emma's face was red and blotchy, her carefully braided hair coming undone. Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, fighting the urge to check her watch. They had exactly 12 minutes before they needed to leave, and Emma's emotional meltdowns typically required at least 20 minutes to resolve properly. "We've talked about this. Violin builds discipline, and I don't care about discipline. I want to do something fun." Emma threw herself onto the carpet dramatically. "Found them." Marcus appeared with muddy cleats, leaving a trail of dirt across Rebecca's freshly vacuumed carpet. Rebecca closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, her maximum allowance for self-pity, then opened them with renewed determination. "Emma, you can practice violin after school. Right now, we need to get ready. Marcus, shoes go in the mudroom, not on my clean floors." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of lunchboxes, backpacks, forgotten homework assignments, and the particular chaos that occurs when two children and one overwhelmed adult try to occupy the same space. Rebecca's reflection in the hallway mirror showed a woman who looked put together on the surface. Her dark hair in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup applied with efficiency, clothes that suggested casual sophistication rather than the fact that she'd grabbed them from the floor of her closet. The drive to Emma's elementary school was a symphony of contradictions. Classical music played softly from the speakers while Emma sniffled in the back seat, and Marcus practiced his spelling words at maximum volume. Rebecca navigated the carpool lane with the skill of a Formula One driver, smiling and waving at other mothers while internally calculating how many minutes she could shave off her grocery store trip. "Have a wonderful day, you two," she called as her children joined the stream of small humans flowing toward the school entrance. Emma turned back once, her expression still sulky but softened by uncertainty. "Will you pick me up today, Mom? Or will it be Mrs. Patterson again?" The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Mrs. Patterson was their babysitter, a lovely retired teacher who'd been filling in more and more frequently as Rebecca's volunteer commitments expanded. "I'll be here, baby. I promise." The drive to Marcus's middle school was shorter, but more complex. He was at the age where being seen with his mother required careful negotiation. "Can you drop me off at the corner?" Marcus asked, already unbuckling his seatbelt as they approached the school. "It's raining, Marcus." "Just at the corner, Mom. Please." Rebecca pulled over a block away from the school, watching her son jog through the light drizzle with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. When had he gotten so tall? When had he stopped wanting her hugs in public? The house felt eerily quiet when she returned. Rebecca moved through the morning cleanup routine with mechanical efficiency. Dishes in the dishwasher, beds made, toys returned to their designated bins. The silence was supposed to be peaceful, but instead, it felt hollow, filled with all the things she wasn't saying and all the dreams she wasn't pursuing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Jennifer in California. "Coffee date with my writers group today. How's the book project coming?" Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment. The book project had been her attempt at freelance writing, something she could do from home while managing everything else. The half-finished manuscript sat on her laptop like a reproach, another thing she'd started with enthusiasm and abandoned under the weight of daily responsibilities. She typed back, "Busy with the kids. Rain check on updates?" 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before Jennifer's response came through. "You always say that. When's the last time you did something just for you?" Rebecca set her phone aside without responding. When was the last time? She couldn't remember. The grocery store was a masterclass in strategic efficiency. Rebecca had the aisles memorized, her list organized by location, coupons sorted by expiration date. She moved through the produce section with purpose, selecting organic apples and examining tomatoes with the concentration of a quality control inspector. Rebecca Chen Martinez? She turned to find Melissa Hartwell approaching with a cart filled with processed foods and a toddler having a meltdown over a box of cookies. Melissa had been in Rebecca's prenatal class 9 years ago, back when they'd both believed they'd maintain their pre-baby friendships and somehow balance motherhood with their career aspirations. "Melissa, how are you?" Rebecca's smile was automatic, the same one she'd perfected for school events and neighborhood gatherings. "Oh, you know how it is." Melissa gestured vaguely at her screaming toddler. "Living the dream, right?" There was something brittle in her laugh, something Rebecca recognized but couldn't quite name. "How's work?" Rebecca asked, remembering that Melissa had been a graphic designer. "I'm on indefinite leave. Again. Little Tyler here has been sick more than he's been healthy, and daycare won't take him with a runny nose." Melissa bounced the toddler absently, her eyes unfocused. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever use my degree again, you know?" Rebecca nodded, understanding flooding through her like recognition. "I know exactly what you mean." "Do you?" Melissa's voice sharpened slightly. "Because your Facebook posts always make it look like you have everything figured out." The words hung between them like an accusation. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks, realizing how her carefully curated social media presence must appear to others struggling with similar challenges. It's not as perfect as it looks," Rebecca admitted quietly. Melissa's expression softened. None of it is it? But nobody talks about that part. They stood there for a moment, two women surrounded by the fluorescent-lit abundance of suburban consumerism, sharing a moment of unvarnished honesty that felt more intimate than years of casual friendship. "Mommy, I want cookies!" Tyler's wail reached a new octave. "I should go," Melissa said, her moment of openness closing like a door. "Maybe we can grab coffee sometime. Actually catch up." "I'd like that," Rebecca said, and meant it. The rest of her grocery trip felt different somehow, as if Melissa's words had shifted something in her perspective. She found herself really looking at the other shoppers. The mother juggling a phone call while corralling 3 children, the woman standing paralyzed in the cereal aisle with tears in her eyes, the elderly man carefully counting coupons at the checkout. Everyone was struggling with something. Everyone was just trying to make it through their day. Back home, Rebecca unpacked groceries with unusual thoughtfulness. Her phone buzzed constantly. Reminder about the PTA fundraiser, request to volunteer for the school book fair, invitation to join another committee. Each notification felt like a small weight being added to an already overloaded scale. She stood in her perfect kitchen, surrounded by organic produce and color-coordinated containers, and felt the strangest sensation, like she was viewing her life from the outside, wondering who this woman was and how she'd gotten here. The afternoon stretched ahead with its familiar rhythm: school pickup, after-school activities, homework supervision, dinner prep. But for the first time in years, Rebecca found herself questioning whether the rhythm was sustainable, whether the perfection she'd been striving for was actually making anyone happy. As she prepared lunch for herself, a salad eaten standing up while organizing her calendar, she couldn't shake Melissa's question. When was the last time she'd done something just for herself? The answer was disturbing in its simplicity. She couldn't remember. The realization settled over her like a cold fog, and Rebecca Chen Martinez, perfect mother and organized wife, felt the first crack in the facade she'd spent 9 years constructing. Outside, the October rain continued to fall, washing the suburban streets clean while leaving everything else exactly as it was. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The afternoon pickup routine at Maplewood Elementary had become a carefully choreographed dance of suburban efficiency. Rebecca arrived precisely 15 minutes early, claiming her usual spot in the carpool line while scrolling through emails on her phone. The PTA president needed volunteers for the Halloween carnival. The soccer league required updated medical forms. Emma's piano teacher wanted to discuss advancing to more challenging pieces. Each email felt like another appointment penciled into an already overcrowded calendar. "Rebecca!" A cheerful voice interrupted her mental scheduling. Sarah Kim approached the passenger window, her perfectly straightened hair defying the October humidity. Sarah was everything Rebecca had thought she wanted to be. Former marketing executive turned full-time mother who seemed to navigate both roles with enviable ease. "How are you holding up with all the Halloween preparations?" Sarah leaned against the car, her yoga pants and designer sneakers somehow looking more put together than Rebecca's actual attempt at business casual. "Oh, managing," Rebecca replied, closing her email app. "Emma's convinced she needs a completely handmade costume this year." "Isn't that wonderful? Such creativity." Sarah's enthusiasm felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. "I just finished Mason's astronaut helmet. Pinterest is both a blessing and a curse, don't you think?" Rebecca forced a laugh. "Definitely both. Speaking of which, I meant to ask, would you be interested in joining our mom's book club? We meet every other Thursday at Cafe Luna. It's such a nice break from the usual routine." The invitation hung in the air between them. Rebecca's immediate instinct was to say yes, to add another commitment to her already strained schedule because that's what good mothers did. They maintained social connections and intellectual pursuits alongside everything else. "That sounds lovely," Rebecca heard herself say, even as her internal calendar protested. "What are you reading?" This month it's Educated by Tara Westover. Heavy topic, but so powerful. It really makes you think about the choices we make and the lives we leave behind. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, that reminds me, didn't you used to write? Before the kids?" The question hit Rebecca unexpectedly. Before the kids? As if her previous self had been neatly filed away in some storage unit of abandoned identities. "A little," Rebecca said carefully. "Journalism mostly. Nothing too exciting." "Oh, I think that's so admirable. I always wanted to write, but I never had the discipline. Maybe when the kids are older." Sarah's voice trailed off with the particular wistfulness of deferred dreams. The school bell rang, saving Rebecca from having to respond. Children poured out of the building like colorful confetti, their voices creating a joyful cacophony that momentarily drowned out her circling thoughts. Emma appeared at the car window, violin case in one hand, artwork in the other, her earlier morning tears replaced by the resilient excitement that only 7-year-olds could manage. "Mom, look what I made!" Emma thrust a watercolor painting through the window, a family portrait with stick figures standing in front of a house that looked suspiciously like a rainbow threw up on it. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Rebecca said, and meant it. "Tell me about it. That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's Marcus, and that's me, and that's our house. Except I made it more colorful because our real house is kind of boring." Out of the mouths of babes. Rebecca studied the painting more closely. Her stick figure self was smiling, but there was something odd about the proportions. The mother figure was significantly smaller than the others, almost as if she were fading into the background. The drive to Marcus's school required crossing through downtown Maplewood, where the autumn trees created a picturesque canopy over streets lined with boutiques and coffee shops that Rebecca rarely had time to enjoy. She glimpsed women her age sitting at sidewalk cafes, laptops open, coffee cups cradled in their hands as they worked or talked or simply existed in spaces that weren't defined by anyone else's schedule. When had she stopped going to coffee shops? When had she stopped sitting anywhere that wasn't a carpool lane or soccer field bleacher? Marcus emerged from middle school with the particular brand of preteen exhaustion that suggested social navigation had been as demanding as academic work. His usual chatter was replaced by monosyllabic responses to Rebecca's gentle inquiries about his day. "Soccer practice is at 4, Rebecca reminded him as they headed home. "Can't Dad take me today?" Marcus slumped lower in his seat. "Dad has to work late." "Again?" The question carried more weight than its single syllable should have been able to bear. Rebecca glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing her son's reflection and recognizing something familiar in his expression. The particular resignation that came from accepting disappointment as routine. "I'll take you," she said firmly, "and I'll stay and watch practice." "You don't have to watch, Mom." None of the other moms stay. But Rebecca found herself wanting to stay, wanting to be present in a way she hadn't prioritized before. "I want to watch." The hour between school pickup and soccer practice should have been sacred, a rare pocket of time where Rebecca could tackle household tasks or prepare dinner without interruption. Instead, she found herself sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop open, staring at the document titled Chapter 3 Draft that had remained unchanged for 6 weeks. Emma practiced piano in the living room, her improvement noticeable despite her morning protests. Marcus sprawled across the kitchen table, homework spread in an organized chaos that reminded Rebecca of her own college study habits. For a moment, the house felt peaceful rather than pressured. Rebecca's fingers moved tentatively across the keyboard, adding a few sentences to her neglected manuscript. The words came slowly, rusty from disuse, but they came. "Mom, what's 7 times 8? Marcus looked up from his math worksheet. 56, Rebecca replied automatically, not lifting her eyes from the screen. "How do you know that so fast?" Rebecca paused, considering the question. "Practice, I guess. The more you use your brain for something, the easier it becomes." "Like piano," Emma called from the living room. "Like piano," Rebecca agreed, then added quietly. "Like writing." The moment stretched, filled with the comfortable sounds of family life, pencil scratching against paper, piano keys being pressed with increasing confidence, the distant hum of the dishwasher. Rebecca added another paragraph to her manuscript, then another. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Running even later than expected. Can you handle dinner solo?" Rebecca stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The automatic response would be, "Of course, no problem," accompanied by the silent mental recalculation of her evening schedule. Instead, she found herself typing, "This is becoming a pattern. We need to talk." She deleted the message before sending it. Instead, she wrote back, "Okay, see you when you get home." But something had shifted in that moment of almost honesty, like a tectonic plate moving deep underground. Soccer practice took place at Maplewood Community Park, where the October air carried the scent of dying leaves and the distant promise of winter. Rebecca set up her fold-out chair on the sidelines, laptop balanced on her knees, determined to make use of the hour. The other mothers clustered in small groups, their conversations drifting over the sound of cleats against grass and coaches shouting encouragement. Rebecca usually positioned herself within earshot, but not quite part of any particular group. Close enough to seem social, far enough to maintain plausible deniability if she needed to focus on other tasks. Today, she found herself really listening. O told him if he misses one more business dinner, I'm attending the partner's Christmas party alone. Pediatrician says it's normal for her age, but I can't help wondering if I'm doing something wrong. Went back to work part-time, but somehow I'm still doing everything at home, plus trying to rebuild my career. Each conversation fragment felt like pieces of a puzzle Rebecca was just beginning to recognize. The mothers around her, despite their varied circumstances, seemed to be struggling with variations of the same theme. The weight of invisible labor, the challenge of maintaining identity while serving everyone else's needs, the exhaustion that came from never quite feeling like enough. Mind if I sit? Rebecca looked up to find a woman she didn't recognize. Tall, with graying hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked comfortable rather than carefully curated. Of course, Rebecca gestured to the empty space beside her chair. I'm Diana Walsh. My grandson Tyler just joined the team. The woman settled onto the bleacher with a sigh of relief. These bones aren't built for portable chairs anymore. Rebecca Chen Martinez. My son Marcus has been playing for 2 years. Rebecca closed her laptop, sensing that Diana wasn't interested in small talk about soccer statistics. That your work? Diana nodded toward the computer. Attempting to write, Rebecca said, surprised by her own honesty. It's harder to find time than I expected. Diana laughed, a sound rich with recognition rather than judgment. Everything's harder than we expect when we're trying to fit it around everyone else's needs. What kind of writing? I used to be a journalist. Now I'm trying to write a book about women who lose themselves in motherhood and marriage. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's probably too personal to be interesting to anyone else. Honey, personal is exactly what makes something interesting. The universal lives in the specific, as my writing professor used to say. You're a writer? Was. It's complicated. Diana's expression grew thoughtful. I spent 20 years not writing while I raised my kids and supported my husband's career. Thought I'd get back to it someday. Someday turned into 2 decades. Did you get back to it? Eventually. After my divorce, after my kids were grown, after I stopped waiting for permission to want something for myself. Diana's voice carried no bitterness, just the weight of experience. But I wish I hadn't waited so long. I wish I'd figured out how to honor both parts of myself, the mother and the writer. Rebecca felt something loosen in her chest, like a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. How do you do that? Honor both parts? Very imperfectly, Diana admitted. But you start by acknowledging that you're allowed to want things. You're allowed to have needs that aren't about anyone else. Revolutionary concept, right? On the field, Marcus scored a goal, his face lighting up with pure joy as his teammates surrounded him in celebration. Rebecca felt the familiar surge of maternal pride, but underneath it was something new, a recognition that her son's happiness didn't require her to disappear entirely. The thing is, Diana continued, watching the boys reset for play, we're modeling something for our children. They're watching how we treat ourselves, how we prioritize our needs, how we define our worth. Do we want them to grow up thinking love means self-sacrifice, that being valuable means being invisible? The questions hung in the cool autumn air, more provocative than any book club discussion Rebecca had ever attended. Practice ended with the usual chaos of grass-stained uniforms and post-game energy. Marcus bounded over to Rebecca, still glowing from his goal. Did you see it, Mom? Did you see when I scored? I saw everything, Rebecca said, pulling him into a hug that smelled like sweat and October air and pure childhood joy. I'm so proud of you. As they packed up to leave, Diana pressed a business card into Rebecca's hand. Local writers group meets Tuesday nights at the library. No pressure, but you might find your people there. Driving home, Rebecca found herself taking the long way, past the coffee shops and bookstores and galleries that comprised downtown Maplewood's attempt at bohemian charm. The evening light cast everything in golden hues, making the familiar streets look like somewhere she might want to explore rather than simply navigate. Mom, can we get ice cream? Emma asked from the back seat. Rebecca checked the time, 6:47 p.m. Dinner should be starting soon. David would be home eventually, expecting the family routine to have proceeded smoothly in his absence. You know what? Yes, let's get ice cream. Really? Marcus twisted in his seat to look at her. But what about dinner? Ice cream can be dinner, just this once. The ice cream parlor was busy with other families who'd apparently made similar spontaneous decisions. Rebecca watched her children debate flavors with the intensity of United Nations negotiations and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: spontaneous joy. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Home in an hour. What's the dinner situation? Rebecca looked at her children, faces sticky with chocolate and vanilla, and typed back, We're having ice cream for dinner. Long story. See you soon. For the first time in years, she didn't apologize or explain or offer to have a proper meal waiting when he arrived. They sat outside the parlor as the sun set, eating ice cream and talking about nothing in particular. Emma showed Rebecca how she'd learned to eat her cone from the bottom up without making a mess. Unsuccessful, but entertaining. Marcus explained the intricate social dynamics of middle school lunch tables with the seriousness of an anthropologist. Rebecca found herself present in a way she couldn't remember being in months, not mentally planning the next task or solving the next problem, just existing in the moment with her children. This is nice, Emma said, chocolate smeared across her cheek. It is nice, Rebecca agreed, and realized she meant it completely. The crack in her perfect facade had widened a little more, but instead of feeling like a failure, it felt like the first breath of air she'd taken in years. Chapter 3. The Weight of Invisible Things. David arrived home at 9:23 p.m. to find Rebecca sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop open, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her, and two children who'd apparently had ice cream for dinner based on the residual stickiness and guilty grins. How was your day? He asked, loosening his tie and heading straight for the refrigerator. Rebecca paused her typing. She'd managed to add 3 paragraphs to her manuscript, more than she'd written in weeks. Interesting. How was the deposition? Brutal. Henderson's team brought in a new expert witness we weren't expecting. David emerged with leftover pasta, eating it cold from the container while scrolling through his phone. Did Emma practice violin today? The question was casual, part of their established evening routine of checking boxes and ensuring their children's development stayed on track. But tonight, something about it irritated Rebecca in a way she couldn't quite articulate. She practiced this morning and had a good day at school, and Marcus scored a goal at soccer practice. Rebecca's voice carried a slight edge that David didn't seem to notice. That's great. I'll try to make the next game. He'd been saying that for months. Rebecca closed her laptop and really looked at her husband. When had the distance between them become so vast? When had their conversations devolved into logistics and status reports? David, when was the last time we talked? Really talked? About something other than schedules and responsibilities? He looked up from his phone, seeming genuinely confused by the question. We talk every day. Do we? Or do we just exchange information? David set down his pasta, his expression shifting from confusion to the particular wariness men develop when they sense a conversation about feelings approaching. Is everything okay? Did something happen today? Rebecca almost laughed at the question. Did something happen? Everything happened, nothing happened. She'd spent another day managing every detail of their family's existence while slowly disappearing in the process, but David's question assumed that her emotional state required an external trigger, some specific event that would justify disruption to their established patterns. I had ice cream for dinner with the kids today, she said instead. Okay. David waited for additional context that would make sense of this apparently random information. It was spontaneous. We were driving home from soccer practice, and Emma asked for ice cream. And instead of saying no because it was dinner time, I said yes. And we sat outside the parlor and talked about nothing important, and it was the first time in months I felt like I was actually present in my own life. David's expression suggested he was trying to navigate a conversation in a language he didn't quite understand. That sounds nice? The response, well-meaning but completely missing the point, crystallized something Rebecca had been feeling but couldn't articulate. David heard her words but didn't understand their significance. He lived in the same house, participated in the same family, but occupied a completely different emotional landscape. I met a woman today, Rebecca continued, not sure why she was pushing the conversation forward. An older woman whose grandson is on Marcus's team. She asked me what I was working on, and when I told her about trying to write a book, she said something that's been bothering me all evening. What did she say? She asked if I'd figured out how to honor both parts of myself, the mother and the writer, and I realized I've been treating those as mutually exclusive identities, like I had to choose between being a good mother and being a person with her own dreams. David sat down across from her, his phone finally face down on the counter. You're a great mother, Becca. The kids adore you, and everything runs so smoothly because of how organized you are. I don't know how you do it all. The compliment should have felt good, but instead it highlighted the very problem Rebecca was trying to articulate. David saw her efficiency and organization, the external management of their lives, but seemed unaware of the internal cost. But what about the parts of me that aren't about being your wife or their mother? What about the person I was before all this? You're still that person, am I? When was the last time I read a book that wasn't about parenting strategies? When did I last have a conversation about my own interests instead of everyone else's schedules? When did I last make a decision based on what I wanted rather than what was best for the family? The questions hung in the space between them, and Rebecca could see David struggling to understand why these things mattered when their current system worked so well for everyone else. If you want to write more, you should write more, he said finally. I support that. It's not about permission, David. It's about the fact that I have to fight for every minute I spend on myself, while your career and interests and needs are treated as default priorities that the rest of us accommodate. David's jaw tightened slightly. That's not fair. I work to support our family. Everything I do is for you and the kids. I know that, but do you understand that I've been working too? Managing this household, coordinating everyone's schedules, handling all the emotional labor, volunteering at school, maintaining our social connections. It's work, even if it doesn't come with a paycheck. They stared at each other across the kitchen island, and Rebecca realized they were having the conversation she'd been avoiding for months. The conversation about the inequitable distribution of not just household tasks, but emotional responsibility. The conversation about how she'd gradually become the family's project manager, while her own projects withered from neglect. I don't understand what you want me to do differently, David said, his voice carrying a note of frustration. I can't work less. The partnership track requires this level of commitment. And you've always been better at the household stuff than I am. Better at it? Or just more willing to do it because someone has to and you assumed it wouldn't be you? The accusation sat heavily between them. Rebecca could see David processing it, his analytical mind trying to approach this emotional complexity the same way he'd approach a legal problem, looking for precedent, seeking clear solutions. Maybe we should hire more help, he offered. A housekeeper or a nanny for after school. Rebecca almost smiled at the response. Classic David, throw money at a problem rather than examine the underlying dynamics. It's not about the tasks, David. It's about the fact that I've become invisible in my own life. I exist to make everyone else's life easier, and I don't remember the last time anyone asked what would make my life easier. Upstairs, a door slammed. Marcus, probably frustrated with homework or middle school social dynamics. Both parents looked toward the ceiling, and Rebecca automatically started to rise from her chair. I'll go, David said, putting a hand on her shoulder. Marcus doesn't like talking to you when he's upset, Rebecca said without thinking, then immediately regretted the words. David's face went carefully blank. What do you mean? Rebecca felt like she'd opened a door she couldn't close. He comes to me with problems. You're not around very much, and when you are, you're usually tired or distracted. He's learned not to bother you with emotional stuff. The words were brutal in their honesty, and Rebecca watched David absorb them like physical blows. I didn't realize... David's voice was quiet. That's the problem. You don't realize because I handle everything. I'm the buffer between you and the messy parts of family life. I manage the emotions and coordinate the schedules and solve the problems, and that lets you exist in this space where parenthood is just the fun parts and the logistics magically happen around you. Another slam from upstairs, followed by the sound of Emma's door opening. Mom? Emma's voice drifted down the stairs. Marcus is crying, and he won't tell me why. Rebecca and David looked at each other, and in that moment, Rebecca made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Your turn," she said to David. "Go be the parent who handles the difficult emotions." David looked genuinely panicked, but I don't know what to say to him when he's like this. Neither did I the first 100 times. You figure it out by doing it. Rebecca watched her husband climb the stairs with the reluctant determination of someone approaching uncharted territory. She heard him knock softly on Marcus's door, heard the quiet murmur of conversation that followed. For the first time in years, Rebecca sat in her kitchen and listened to someone else manage a family crisis. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Jennifer. "Call when you can, having one of those, 'What am I doing with my life' nights." Rebecca smiled wryly and typed back, "Join the club, but maybe that's not a bad thing." She opened her laptop and began typing, her fingers moving more quickly than they had in months. The words poured out. Not the careful, structured prose she'd been attempting, but raw, honest thoughts about motherhood and marriage, and the particular loneliness that came from being surrounded by family while feeling entirely alone. 20 minutes later, David returned to the kitchen, looking emotionally drained, but somehow more present than he'd been in months. "What was wrong?" Rebecca asked. "He's worried about math class, and he's stressed about making friends at school. And he's frustrated that I'm never around to help with homework, because I get home so late." David's voice was quiet, subdued. He asked why you always have to be the one to fix everything. Rebecca felt her heart constrict. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I haven't been paying attention to what he needs, and that's going to change." David sat back down, running his hands through his hair. "He also asked if we were getting divorced." "What?" Rebecca's stomach dropped. Kids pick up on tension, even when we think we're hiding it. Especially Marcus. He's been watching us, trying to figure out why we barely talk to each other anymore, unless it's about logistics. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their son's perceptiveness settling between them like a challenge. "Are we?" David asked quietly. "Getting divorced?" Rebecca considered the question seriously, surprised to find that the answer wasn't immediately clear. 6 months ago, she would have said no without hesitation. Their marriage was solid, functional, built on shared values and mutual respect. But sitting in her kitchen at nearly 10 o'clock at night, she realized that functional and solid weren't the same thing as alive and connected. "I don't know," she said finally. "I know I can't keep living like this, disappearing a little more each day while pretending everything's fine. Then what do you need? Tell me what you need, and I'll try to make it happen." The question was earnest, but Rebecca could hear the underlying assumption that her needs were problems to be solved rather than integral parts of who she was as a person. "I need you to want to know what I need, without me having to explain why it matters. I need you to notice when I'm struggling, instead of assuming I'm fine because the house runs smoothly. I need to feel like your partner, instead of your household manager." David nodded slowly. "I can do that. I want to do that. And I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not managing everyone else's life. I need to write, and I need it to be okay if dinner isn't perfect, or if the laundry sits in baskets for an extra day while I work on something that matters to me." "Of course," David said, though Rebecca could see him calculating how household standards might shift and what that would mean for their carefully maintained routines. "I mean really okay, David. Not okay with resentment or okay with subtle comments about how things used to be more organized. I understand." Rebecca studied her husband's face, searching for signs of genuine comprehension versus the careful agreement of someone trying to navigate a difficult conversation. What she saw was exhaustion that matched her own, and something that might have been relief. "Can I ask you something?" David said. "Are you happy? In general, I mean, not just with our marriage, but with your life." The question caught Rebecca off guard with its directness. When was the last time someone had asked her about her happiness as if it were a legitimate concern rather than a luxury to be considered after everyone else's needs were met? "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been so focused on making sure everyone else is happy that I stopped checking in with myself. But today, sitting outside that ice cream place with the kids, I remembered what it felt like to be present in my own life. And it made me realize how absent I've been." David reached across the counter and took her hand, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign after months of minimal physical connection. "I miss you," he said quietly. "I know that sounds strange since we live in the same house, but I miss the person you were when we first met. the woman who had strong opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to argue with me about politics or books or movies. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. She's still here, just buried under years of putting everyone else first. Then let's figure out how to dig her out. The conversation that followed stretched past midnight, covering territory they hadn't explored in years. They talked about David's assumption that career success would automatically translate to family happiness, and Rebecca's gradual surrender of her own ambitions in service of domestic harmony. They discussed the invisible labor that had become entirely her responsibility and the way their marriage had slowly evolved into a business partnership focused on child rearing rather than a romantic connection between two individuals. Most importantly, they talked about change, not the dramatic, relationship-ending kind, but the slow, intentional work of rebuilding their partnership on more equitable terms. "I want to cut back my hours," David said around 12:30 a.m., "Not abandon the partnership track, but find a way to be more present. Marcus was right. He shouldn't have to depend entirely on you for emotional support." "That would help," Rebecca agreed. "But I also need to take responsibility for the ways I've enabled this dynamic. I've been so focused on being indispensable that I haven't given you space to learn how to handle the difficult parts of parenting." They made tentative plans. David would start coming home for dinner 3 nights a week. Rebecca would join the writers' group Diana had mentioned. They would hire a babysitter 1 evening a week so they could remember how to be a couple instead of just co-parents. Small changes, but they felt revolutionary after years of stagnation. "There's something else," Rebecca said as they finally prepared to go upstairs. "I want to go back to school, get my master's in journalism, maybe explore teaching. I know it would mean less time for household management and more expenses, but..." "Yes," David interrupted. "Whatever you need to make that happen, yes." Rebecca felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized had been constricted. "Just like that? I should have encouraged you to pursue this years ago. I got comfortable with our arrangement, and I didn't pay attention to what it was costing you." David's voice was heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. "I want to be married to someone who's passionate about her own life, not just facilitating everyone else's." They climbed the stairs together, checking on both children before heading to their own bedroom. Marcus was asleep with his math homework still spread across his desk, and Emma had fallen asleep reading, her nightlight casting soft shadows across picture books scattered on her bed. "They're good kids," David said softly as they stood in Emma's doorway. "They are, but they're also watching us figure out how to be good adults." Rebecca adjusted Emma's blanket, thinking about Diana's words earlier that day. "I want them to see that love doesn't require anyone to disappear." As they got ready for bed, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate hope that tomorrow would somehow be easier, but the quiet confidence that change was possible if they were willing to do the work. Her phone buzzed with one final text of the day from Melissa Hartwell. "Been thinking about our conversation at the grocery store. Coffee this week? I meant what I said about actually catching up." Rebecca typed back, "Tuesday morning? I know a place." She set the phone aside and opened her laptop one more time, adding a few final sentences to the chapter she'd been working on. "The hardest part wasn't admitting that the perfect life I'd constructed was slowly killing me. The hardest part was believing I deserved something better, and that wanting more didn't make me ungrateful for what I had. It just made me human." For the first time in years, Rebecca Chen Martinez fell asleep feeling like the protagonist of her own life rather than a supporting character in everyone else's story. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows of their perfect suburban home, but inside, the foundation, cracked but not broken, was beginning the slow work of reconstruction. Chapter 4. Finding Ground. The Maplewood Public Library on Tuesday evening looked different than Rebecca had imagined. Less intimidating, more welcoming. She'd driven past the building countless times while shuttling children to various activities, but had never actually entered the community room where Diana Walsh's writers group met twice monthly. Through the glass doors, she could see 8 people arranged in a circle, notebooks and coffee cups scattered on the tables between them. Diana spotted her lingering in the hallway and waved her in with the kind of smile that suggested she'd been hoping Rebecca would show up. "Everyone, we have a new member joining us tonight," Diana announced as Rebecca settled into an empty chair, clutching her own notebook like a security blanket. "Rebecca is working on a book about motherhood and identity. The introductions that followed revealed a diverse group united by their commitment to writing despite the challenges of daily life. There was Janet, a retired teacher working on historical fiction. Marcus, not her son but close enough in age to make her smile, a college student writing poetry about growing up gay in suburban Connecticut. Elena, a single mother of 3 who somehow found time to craft short stories between nursing shifts. And Thomas, recently divorced, channeling his experience into what he called brutally honest memoir. "We're workshopping first chapters tonight," Diana explained. "Rebecca, you're welcome to just listen this time, but if you'd like to share something..." Rebecca had printed out the pages she'd written over the past few days, raw, unpolished work that felt too personal to show anyone. But something about the group's energy, the way they discussed their vulnerabilities as creative opportunities rather than weaknesses, made her feel brave. "I brought something," she said, surprising herself. "It's rough, but..." "Rough is perfect," Elena laughed. "We're all about rough here. Polish is for later drafts and people who have more time than we do." Rebecca read aloud for the first time in years, her voice shaky at first, but gaining strength as she described the particular loneliness of suburban motherhood, the way perfection could become a prison, the challenge of maintaining identity while serving everyone else's needs. When she finished, the silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. "Damn," Thomas said finally. "That's exactly what my ex-wife tried to tell me for years, but I was too defensive to hear it." "The part about invisible labor," Janet nodded. "You've articulated something I felt for decades but never had words for. Even after retirement, I find myself automatically managing my husband's emotional life while neglecting my own creative needs." The discussion that followed was unlike any conversation Rebecca had experienced in years. These people, strangers an hour ago, understood the creative struggle in ways that her suburban mom friends, however well-meaning, simply couldn't. They talked about writing as necessity rather than hobby, about the particular challenges of creating art while managing families or careers, or both. "The guilt is the worst part," Elena said during a break. "Even when my kids are asleep or at their dad's house, I feel guilty for spending time on something that isn't directly benefiting them. But writing is benefiting them," Marcus pointed out. "They're watching you pursue something you're passionate about. They're learning that adults can grow and change and have interests beyond child-rearing." Rebecca thought about her own children, how Emma had seemed more interested in piano practice since seeing Rebecca work at her laptop, how Marcus had started asking questions about her writing project. "My 9-year-old asked me yesterday what my book was about," Rebecca shared. "When I tried to give him a kid-friendly explanation, he said, 'So it's about how moms are people too?' Sometimes they understand more than we think they do." The group laughed, but Rebecca could see recognition in their faces, the particular insight children possessed about adult contradictions. "Speaking of children," Diana said as they packed up to leave, "how did your husband react to you joining us tonight?" Rebecca considered the question. "Better than I expected, actually. We had a long conversation this weekend about a lot of things. He's trying to be more present with the kids so I have space for writing." "And how's that going?" "Imperfectly," Rebecca admitted, "but imperfect is still progress." The drive home took her past Cafe Luna, where she could see Sarah Kim's book club through the window, women she recognized from school events, discussing literature while sipping wine in an atmosphere that looked sophisticated and comfortable. For a moment, Rebecca felt a pang of something that might have been envy or regret. But then she thought about the rawness of the conversation she'd just left, the way Elena had cried while reading about her divorce, the way Thomas had laughed until he wheezed at his own description of online dating disasters. The writers' group felt messier than book club, more vulnerable, more real. At home, she found David helping Emma with a school project that involved constructing a mission from sugar cubes, a task that would have normally fallen entirely to Rebecca. Emma was directing the construction with the authority of a tiny architect, while David followed her increasingly complex instructions with good-natured confusion. "Mom!" Emma looked up from the kitchen table, which was covered in sugar cubes, glue, and what appeared to be architectural blueprints drawn in crayon. "Daddy doesn't know how to make the bell tower, but I'm teaching him." "I can see that," Rebecca said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. The kitchen was messier than she would have left it, but Emma's excitement was worth any amount of cleanup. "How was the writing group?" David asked, attempting to attach a sugar cube to what might have been a wall. "Good," Really good, actually. I read something I'd written, and people understood what I was trying to say. That's wonderful. David's response carried genuine warmth, rather than the careful politeness she'd grown accustomed to. What's next? They meet again in 2 weeks, and Diana, the woman who invited me, suggested I might want to audit some journalism classes at the community college, just to get back into academic thinking before applying to graduate programs. David looked up from the sugar cube mission, meeting her eyes with something that looked like the man she'd married rather than the distant co-parent he'd become. Do it. Just like that? Just like that. We'll figure out the logistics. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the unusual sounds of family collaboration happening, without Rebecca orchestrating every detail. What are you guys doing? He asked, though the evidence was fairly clear. Building a mission, Emma announced. And Daddy's learning that he's not very good at crafts, but he tries really hard. I heard that, David said, but he was smiling. Rebecca watched her family navigate this unfamiliar dynamic. David present and engaged despite his obvious incompetence with elementary school art projects, Emma patient and encouraging with her father's learning curve, Marcus hovering on the edge of the activity with the particular hesitation of a child testing whether this new family dynamic was safe to trust. "Wanna help?" Rebecca asked Marcus. "I think this mission needs some landscaping." For the next hour, they worked together on Emma's project, debating the historical accuracy of sugar cube bell towers and whether missions traditionally included the elaborate gardens Emma was determined to construct. David's phone remained in his pocket, Rebecca's laptop stayed closed, and the evening felt genuinely collaborative rather than managed. Later, after the children were in bed and the sugar cube debris had been cleared away, Rebecca found herself in her bedroom with her laptop, adding to the chapters she'd shared with the writing group. The words came more easily now, shaped by the evening's conversations and the growing sense that she was reclaiming parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. David appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea, settling beside her on the bed without asking what she was working on. A small gesture that felt revolutionary after years of interruptions disguised as interest. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said after a few minutes of companionable silence. "Of course." "Are you okay? With all these changes, I mean? With me wanting different things than I wanted 5 years ago?" David was quiet for a long moment, steam from his tea rising between them. "Honestly, it's scary. Our old dynamic wasn't great for you, but it was comfortable for me. I knew my role, I knew what was expected, and I didn't have to think too hard about the emotional work of parenting or partnership." Rebecca appreciated his honesty. "And now? Now I'm learning that being a good father means more than providing financial security and showing up for soccer games. And being a good husband means more than assuming you'll handle everything I don't want to deal with." David's voice carried a note of self-recrimination. "I'm embarrassed that it took you nearly leaving for me to pay attention to how unhappy you'd become." "I wasn't going to leave," Rebecca said quietly. "Weren't you? Because that conversation we had this weekend felt like someone who was done. And honestly, you would have been justified." Rebecca considered this. Had she been planning to leave? The possibility had flickered through her mind during her darkest moments, but she'd never seriously considered it as an option, which might have been its own problem, staying because leaving felt impossible, rather than because the relationship was fulfilling. "I think I was leaving in smaller ways," she admitted, emotionally withdrawing, investing less in our connection, building my identity around being indispensable rather than being your partner. Maybe that's just as damaging as physically leaving. Maybe more damaging, because it lets the other person pretend everything's fine. They drank their tea in comfortable silence, Rebecca's laptop balanced between them, David occasionally reading over her shoulder without commentary or suggestion. It felt like the beginning of something new, not the passionate romance of their early relationship, but something more sustainable and intentional. "I have a confession," David said, as Rebecca saved her work and closed the laptop. "I've been jealous of your writing." "Jealous? Why?" "Because you light up when you talk about it in a way you haven't lit up about anything in years, including me." David's voice was matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "I realized I want to be with someone who lights up about things, even if I'm not always the source of that illumination." Rebecca turned to study her husband's profile in the lamplight. "What lights you up? Besides work, I mean." David considered the question seriously. "I used to love photography. Haven't touched my camera in probably 3 years. And I miss playing guitar, even though I was never particularly good at it. What happened to those things? Same thing that happened to your writing, I suppose. Life got busy, other priorities took precedence, and I convinced myself I didn't have time for hobbies. David's smile was rueful. Maybe we both forgot that the things that make us happy as individuals also make us more interesting to live with. Rebecca felt something shift in her understanding of their relationship. They'd both been operating under the assumption that marriage and parenthood required sacrificing individual interests for family unity. But what if the opposite were true? What if maintaining their individual passions made them better partners and parents? "Your camera is still in the closet upstairs," Rebecca said. "Maybe it's time to dust it off." "Maybe it is." As they prepared for sleep, Rebecca realized that the day had been remarkable, not for any dramatic revelations or grand gestures, but for the accumulation of small moments that felt authentic and intentional. Reading her work aloud to strangers who understood the creative impulse, watching David fumble through an art project with their daughter, having a conversation with her husband that felt like genuine connection rather than household management. Her phone showed 3 missed texts, one from Melissa confirming their coffee date for Thursday, one from her sister Jennifer asking about the writing group, and one from Diana. "Wonderful to have you join us tonight. Your voice is exactly what this group needed." Rebecca smiled, setting the phone aside without feeling compelled to respond immediately. The messages could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, she wanted to exist in the satisfaction of a day lived intentionally, of small but significant progress toward becoming the person she wanted to be. As she drifted toward sleep, Rebecca thought about Emma's family portrait from earlier that week, the one where the mother figure had been drawn smaller than everyone else. Tomorrow, she decided, she would ask Emma to draw a new one. This time, she wanted to see what her daughter's family looked like when the mother was the same size as everyone else. Outside, the October night was clear and cool, and Rebecca Chen Martinez fell asleep feeling, for the first time in years, like she was exactly where and who she was supposed to be. The journey wasn't finished, might never be finished, but it had finally begun. And that was enough. The end. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if my story touched your heart today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next confession. Give this video a like if it resonated with you, and share it with another woman who needs to know she's not alone. Together, our voices are stronger.